r/NoStupidQuestions. Own Substance 9386 says, what are the unique eating habits of thin people? I'm a fairly average person, in that I struggle a bit with my weight. But I have a lot of family and close friends who are ale thin, and always have been. My dad is the same wiry size in his 80s as he was in his teens. I always wonder how they stay so thin, other than brute genetics. Because when we go out to eat together, I don't really notice that my skinny friends did anything that differently from the rest of us. Most of them are not even eating healthily or exercising regularly. Some hardly eat veggies at all, in fact. And even if they do, they would also regularly do things like have cupcakes and wine for dinner. Many of them snack on fatty food like it is going out of style. They don't really exercise that much either, other than recreationally, like riding a bike. A few do yoga. And yet they were all beanpoles, rail thin. Something is not adding up. Are the differences due mostly to metabolism, or is there something that I'm missing? Zyoroba says, I have pretty much always been thin, whether I eat healthy or eat like garbage. For me the secret is, a lot of things make me not eat as much, or even miss a meal. Like if I ever eat a ton of unhealthy food, or eat a whole bag of chips or a whole pint of ice cream in one sitting or something, I don't feel that great for a while afterwards, and might end up skipping the next meal unintentionally, or eating only something very small. Or, if I'm really focused or stressed out from work or something, it kills my appetite, and I might end up skipping breakfast or not finding time for a real lunch, etc. So overall, even if I'm eating junk, not exercising, etc., I end up eating less calories than someone who mostly eats healthy, but when they slip up and do have an extra dessert, or finish a whole bag of chips in one go or something, they then just continue on with their regular meal schedule. Or stress makes them eat more instead of less, etc. Basically, things going astray kills my appetite. If it didn't, I would definitely have gained weight in those situations. But you'll still see me eat a lot at restaurants and stuff, just my next meal will end up smaller. Own Substance 9386 says, makes sense. Unfortunately, I eat a lot when I'm stressed out, maybe that's my biggest problem. Number 12 Cheer says, if I have a big meal I will often not eat for the entire rest of day. Even a snack at the wrong time can make it, so dinner is not appetizing at all. Any stressful/depressing time in life causes me to eat very little, and I usually walk when I'm stressed. If I can motivate past the depression to walk, I will go for miles. So for me, tough times equal tons of exercise on reduced calories. Chiffon 420 says, a common issue is snacking. A habit that I've heard before is lowering your calorie intake of your next meal. If you ate a large meal before, you might notice when you go out, but they might be eating very little when you're not around. r/NoStupidQuestions. West Witness 5028 says, why does ice float on water? Ice is solid, so shouldn't it be denser and sink? Can someone explain why ice floats on water? Keprof4eel says, most solids are denser than their liquid forms, but water is an exception. Because of the shape and polarity of the water molecules, when they freeze they arrange themselves in a way that makes them less dense. At least at normal pressures anyway. There are actually many different forms of ice that occur at different temperatures and pressures. Chair Pilot says, great answer. Also wanted to add that, if ice sunk in water, when it formed it would fundamentally change the way our oceans, and therefore planet, worked. Ice floating is so mundane, but also responsible for our current setup in many ways. Maffin 117 says, it's a quirk of water's molecular structure. The fact that it looks like Mickey Mouse's head. And that water is a polar molecule. This means that as water freezes it forms a special crystal structure as all of the hydrogen atoms, the airs, try to line up with all the oxygen atoms, the heads, of the surrounding molecules. And that crystal structure ends up being less dense than liquid water molecules that are more tightly packed as they slip and slide past each other. Daisy Brook 1 says, ice always floats in water because it is less dense. When water freezes, the molecules form a crystal structure that occupies more space, resulting in lower density compared to liquid water. However, in other fluids such as alcohol, ice might not float. r/NoStupidQuestions. Green Tank says, why are canned/bagged soups so bad? My wife is overseas, so I'm eating a lot of soup. I've made many batches of homemade, but I thought I'd go through the different options in the grocery store to get some new ideas and just to try them. All of them, except chunky Irish stew or chili/beans, were awful. They had this slimy texture that I couldn't quite put my finger on and were so flavorless. What's the deal with canned soup? Kibu Fox says, you do know that with many canned soups, you have to add water to cook them right. They are concentrated, so without water in them, they retain a funky slimy texture. Green Tank says, oh shit. Organic Physics 6881 says, not all of them are concentrated. It will list it on the label if you are to add water. Fairlove 6911 says, I've always thought that the sodium content is what is bad about canned food. Otherwise I don't see anything nutritionally wrong with it. Chika Gondi says, common mistake. Soups have high sodium because they contain a good amount of salt. Soup needs salt. Even homemade soup recipes have a good amount of salt, and people typically report soups without salt are missing flavor. Chicken soup without a good whack of salt is particularly sad. Blumenthy Field says, they're full of preservatives and other shit in them, so they last longer. Homemade soup with little to no artificial ingredients will be a million times better, as we have no desire to keep it on a room temperature shelf for multiple years. r/NoStupidQuestions. Zublacorn says, do tribute bands have to get approval from the original artists to play their songs? Also, how do they make their money? I was wondering if copyright would bar tribute bands from getting any monetization from their concerts. Teekno says, no. They just have to pay royalties to the songwriter. Spamkey23 says, only if it's recorded and sold maybe? If it's live any song is fair game. Alt the right type says, music copyright law is complex, but people saying that you can perform a song but not play a recording are not entirely correct. Recordings are protected by copyright, but so are the songs themselves. A performance rights organization, PRO, like a SCAP or BMI in the US, is responsible for collecting and distributing royalties to copyright holders for, among other things, songs performed by a tribute band. Emma7734 says, this can get complicated, but generally, as long as a venue has a license from BMI, a SCAP, or whoever else, you can play any song by any songwriter, covered by the license. Songs from theatrical productions are not usually included by the blanket license. Those rights have to be negotiated. Your high school, for example, can't stage Fiddler on the Roof or Wicked without purchasing a license. Many years ago Bono of the band U2 sang part of Send in the Clowns during a concert. That song is from the musical A Little Night Music. It ended up costing the band $50,000 because that song was not covered by the venue license. Another interesting case is Zappa Plays Zappa. Dweezil Zappa put together a band and toured under that name, performing songs from his dad, Frank Zappa. The Zappa Family Trust sued him. The Zappa Family Trust, of which Dweezil is a member, is a sad and interesting story of its own, but that's for another day. The trust claimed trademark infringement of the name Zappa, which is, of course, Dweezil Zappa's name. They also claimed that performing the Zappa songs was a dramatic work, which meant the blanket license would not apply. Basically, they wanted Dweezil to stop using his own name and stop playing songs that he, or anyone else, was entitled to play. In the end, Dweezil ended up changing the name of the tour to 50 Years of Frank Dweezil Zappa Plays Whatever the F at in Area K. He wants the cease and desist tour. r/NoStupidQuestions. Home Even 2 says, why did the Olympics stop being a competition for amateurs to compete? Broccoli says, money. Star athletes draw more viewers. Some say because pros are the best athletes, but the Olympics were never about the overall best, they were about the best amateurs from every country. Always Springer Towel 41 says, and inequality on how to assess who is a pro around the world. There was a long time where the Russian Hockey League was a military league, so they were considered amateurs, but now couldn't compete. Pros going into temporary retirement to compete. International Soil 745 says, there were no pro sports when Olympics started. And over the years communist countries didn't play fair, as they fielded teams with virtual professional players against college kids from the West. Allowing professional athletes not only guaranteed the best athletes would compete, but leveled the playing field. R5 says, because amateur already was a euphemism in many cases. You just had to not pay athletes directly, but there were so many ways around that rule. Several nations have sports soldiers or police officers who are guaranteed to be able to prioritize their training over their service. Before that you had rich people competing, as they had the resources to dedicate their lives to sport, or just to travel to events. That's all for this video. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe.